Welcome to section 5, A.L. Basham Anthology work in the text The Buddhist Tradition by Tabari. Let's read it and then we analyze it. The Suffering Savior. In many passages of the Mahayana scriptures is to be found what purports to be the solemn resolve made by a bodhisattva at the beginning of his career. The following fine passage will appear particularly striking to Western readers, for in it the bodhisattva not only resolves to pity and help all mortal beings, but also to share their interest sufferings. So what's going on in this passage here? Why does Basham use vocabulary normally you would associate from Christian theology? What am I referring to? Well, in this section and the following section, Basham discusses if the origin of this soteriological motif, the idea of vicarious sacrifice, this suffering servant, let's use this title, that's Basham's title, actually lies in the influence of Christianity on Buddhism. Now, this is a form of higher criticism that he's involved in doing, looking at sources, trying to establish causal links. And is he justified in doing that is the question. Why might Basham think it could be argued that Christianity has influenced Mahayana Buddhism? Well, he's making a point about history and drawing our attention to history, particularly of the Nestatorian Eastern form of Christianity and its missions into Asia. Not well known in the West, but the reality was the Eastern Church was as developed as the Western Church through what was called the Nestatorian Empire. And Christianity spread very quickly in the first few centuries beyond Israel, Palestine, through to Syria and Persia, the homeland of the Nestatorian Empire. Beyond that, through modern-day Afghanistan, beyond that to China and India and so on. And you can see in the map here the Nestatorian missions in Asia. And he's asking us to speculate in the theories of Mahayana, does the idea of the Bodhisattva come from, in part, the influence of Christianity? And in the passage, he says, in many passages of the Mahayana scriptures, let's highlight that in many passages of the Mahayana scriptures is to be found, well, which scriptures? Well, it might be argued that the Bodhisattva vow is a development of the monastic ideas of the Patmokkha vows, and in some sense emerges first in the 100 BC, 8,000 lines, the Astra Sarika Prajna Parimita Sutra, as we've looked at and he's quoted already. The Bodhisattva vow is then found in the 25,000 line text, the Avamsaka Sutra. It's found in Shanti Deva's text that he is going to quote at length later, and who is in his compendium of doctrine, his anthology of texts. So this is an anthology piece quoting an anthology of texts. In particular, one of the texts that's quoted is the Bodhisattva Karavatyatara, which is a text developed both by Nagarjuna, Madhyamaka, Asanga, and Siddhamatra. It's a much developed idea in Mahayana. Basham is trying to follow the textual evidence where it leads. And following mid-20th century scholarship, this idea of source criticism is his methodology for identifying the textual source, an earlier textual source that is a source for a later textual development. So the evolution of this concept of the Bodhisattva ideal, i.e. the vow, he claims could have its origins in Isaiah 53, which is the biblical text in the Old Testament that many Christians claim is the way that Jesus should be understood as the Messiah, who will suffer and die for sin, who will offer his life and as a vicarious sacrifice for others. So this method of source criticism is making claims to knowledge. And what we need to do is think about the argument's merits. Why does Basham use the phrase cannot be ruled out? Can, where is it? Is the finding both being the create? Well, this comes up in the next passage. What cannot be ruled out? The resolve, the vow. Basham's choice of language in talking about cannot be ruled out reflects his empirical instincts, his Western influence of Western post-Enlightenment philosophy. The vow would be a more intuitive English word or translation that reflects the transcendent nature of the belief, i.e., the Trichia doctrine and so on in Buddhism. Is Basham's translation of resolve rather than vow accurate? So we see this word resolve coming up a few times. The solemn resolve made by Bodhisattva at the beginning of his career only resolves to pity and help all. Well, yes, I think resolve is a good interpretation of the word vow, because it's Basham is trying to capture the feeling that this thought is to be one that must result in what Denise Cush would call a super knowledge, or what William James would call noetic religious experience, as a kind of revelation, similar to the Buddha's revelation. So Basham's language of pity and share, is that accurate? Let's look again here. To pity and to share in their sufferings and their interests. Is that accurate? Yes, it is. It is accurate. Again, because it's this feeling that we should gain through a kind of transcendent insight, through an experiential awareness, a super knowledge, a noetic insight into others, be it people we know or be it people we've never met, their sufferings, their interests. So this was section 5, and the key phrase was this idea of the resolve or the vow taken by Mahayana Buddhists to liberate all sentient beings. One who's taken the vow is nominally known as a bodhisattva. This can be done by venerating all Buddhas or by cultivating your own supreme moral and spiritual perfection, i.e. the 6 paramitas, 6 virtues, and placing them and you as a person in the service of others. So this was section 5.